Good afternoon. We resume our lecture today. This is in the series of lectures on Six Sigma that we've been conducting for some time. And we have the last two lectures to go. There's this one today about getting the organization ready for implementing Six Sigma. And in the last one, I'll be giving you some examples of what exactly the actions are once you're on with a project on Six Sigma. As you realize, there've been a lot of movements in the direction of quality because of competitive pressures on profits and so on and so forth. In industry, a lot of people have been trying to do various things, and this has been going on for quite some time. It started in the 60s. The quality movement started in the 60s, and it went through some statistical training, some training in TQM, and so on and so forth. And sporadically, there have been various interventions done by different companies. And they've had mixed results. It was only when results got quantified and some leading companies, they did some good introspection as to what exactly they had to do to try to get their organization ready for a big movement like Six Sigma, to reach a level of excellence that had not been achieved till this point. People really realized that something different had to happen now. There are companies, and you can find many of them even now, who would probably say that, well, TQM was a fad, and the other methods are too complicated. I cannot really get my boys to do control charts and so on and so forth. So unless you give me some small pill, give me a silver bullet, I'm really not going to be doing anything different from just inspecting my goods. That's it. In fact, the training in this area, in the area of quality assurance, quality management, quality control, has been so meager that many engineering graduates come out of colleges without having much appreciation of either of statistics or of methods to try to help improve quality of the organization in which they are going to work. And quality has become even more important than it was before because of a couple of things. One is there are many competitors. They are all providing the same product or the same service or the same mix of things. And if you've got to survive, got to win volume, you got to win good profits, you got to make good money. And that just cannot be done if customers are going somewhere else. It just cannot be done. So it's kind of critical that you saw that taking place, for example, in the automotive industry. You saw that in electronics. Companies that could not really come close to the best in the world in the global sense, they are not surviving anymore. Their businesses have gone down, and companies such as Motorola could see these signals coming way back, and they started taking steps that were quite different the way they had traditionally managed quality. You know about the special program that they put through. They coined it Six Sigma. There's someone in the company who realized, someone in Motorola who realized that a metric had to be there and a methodology had to be there, whereby the movement toward trying to reduce defects would really become part and parcel of the daily operation, day-to-day operation inside the company. Till that happened, it just would not be feasible, in fact, to retain good business. It just would not be feasible. Now, suppose some company X wants to move into Six Sigma. Many of them, they have a feeling that it could be done overnight. It could be done with some training, and perhaps we could get a consultant. He could probably shape things up for us. And then business would be honky-dory. There should be really no problem at all. But there's a lot of stuff that has to be done at the managerial level, at the professional level, at the workers level, and so on and so forth. A lot of things have to be done differently if you really want to go the Six Sigma way, if you really want to bring those big bucks to your company. Couple of things have to be kept in mind. You are doing Six Sigma for the benefits. You're not doing this because somebody else did TQM and you heard about it, so you would be doing TQM, you'd be doing quality circles and stuff like that. Six Sigma cannot be done that way. You really have to quantify the potential benefits. You have to go after them. So if you look at the slide, it says what are some of the benefits that you can expect out of Six Sigma? Capacity increase, because there will be fewer defective parts produced, fewer defective products produced, fewer customers are happy, and so on and so forth. So whatever you produce, that is going to be all basically useful stuff, and that's going to be sold, and that's going to bring you good money. Fixed cost takeout. This is like something that once you put in some money, you think it's going to be a kind of the thing is once you go into a movement like Six Sigma, a lot of fixed costs, they become less and less important. Variable cost. How does variable cost get affected if you go into Six Sigma? Something you got to remember is variable cost changes with the amount of volume that you produce, the number of items that you produce, or the number of customers you serve. Something you've got to remember is if quality is good, if the fraction of production that you produce is, if it's all saleable, that's going to bring down your variable cost also, because you have fewer defects, less labor utilized in it, less utilities utilized in it, less material utilized in it, and therefore that's going to bring down your variable cost. That's also something that's going to be there. Systems cost, all the time that it takes you to track down customer complaints and so on, those are also going to be reduced. So those are also going to be places where the company is probably going to make some benefits, draw some benefits out of. Product mix improvement, your products are going to be better targeted, and you'll know exactly that if I produce something, there's going to be a good market for it. Because my whole process started, for example, with QFD and Kano process and so on and so forth. You pinpointed precisely what was required by the customer, by the segment of the market that I'm after. So you'll be basically improving your product mix also. The offerings that you'll be doing, you'll be making those also would be much better tuned. Sales growth is going to be a natural consequence of this. And new product sales growth, because the whole process of bringing out a new product also changes. It goes through a lot of scientific steps before you bring out a new product. In fact, it's going to be very critical for you to realize what is it that you'd like to achieve, and you achieve what is important. How do I get there? Again, I could approach this using the DMAC model. I define what is important, and what would be our activities to discover what exactly is important. This is something I've got to do some good thinking about, and then only I'll be able to list out activities that will help me find what exactly is important, and what is important to customers, what is important for my system, what is important for myself, what is important for my business. All those things would come into play once you try to define this. Then, of course, measure how are we doing, how is our quality performance, how is our customer satisfaction performance, how is our CPK, how are the control charts doing, what sort of defects are we producing, what sort of various types of costs of poor quality we are basically piling up. That is also something where I need some measurement. Then once you locate the problems, once you locate that it's not such a good story, you'll have to analyze, and there you'll bring in tools like the cause and effect diagram, for example. And you'll do root cause analysis, you'll do analysis to try to find out what is wrong and what might have caused it. This is a place where you try to get some handle on what might be required for you to do, what changes you might require in your company or in your processes to be able to make that improvement. And the next is, of course, fixing what is wrong. If you've discovered the gap, if you understood what exactly is not quite right, what is not meeting specs, what is not really neither meeting the customer's basic needs, not functional needs, not delighting him, then I've got to do something about it. I've got to fix things. And the method that we discussed in this process in the DMAC framework was improvement. And that has one of the key tools used there is your design of experiments, DOE. Once you've found the optimum settings for your control parameters, once you've done that, whether it's process parameter, whether it's the way you deal with your customers and so on, whatever it is, once you've located the optimum settings of these control actions, you got to maintain that. And that's exactly where your control action comes in. You'll guarantee performance. Once you reach that optimum level, optimum setting of the control variables, you got to keep them there. And there you've got to do some monitoring on an ongoing basis. And this could be done using control charts or any kind of metric that you want to set up that will give you some feedback as to what is going on. If you want to prepare for implementing Six Sigma, there are these things that we have to do. Awareness of the present status. This is something we got to do. We cannot really escape this. We cannot really jump over this. Then exactly we have to look at, for example, what are the critical issues, what are the critical customer dissatisfaction issues, and what are going to be some of the superior choices. This is something you've got to be able to do. What are going to be the prerequisites for successful implementation? This also is something that you've got to be able to do. These are prerequisites in the sense there's got to be a certain amount of preparedness. This might involve training, this might involve benchmarking, this might involve finding out how best this process could work, who else is using it, how is he using it, what about supplier performance and so on and so forth, what about worker training level and so on and so forth. These are some of the things where you've got to work, and this is like your prerequisites before you can implement Six Sigma successfully. Then, of course, you've got to create Six Sigma focus. You've got to get people, everybody in the organization oriented toward excellence. This is something you got to be able to do. Unless you do that, people won't be pulling it in all in the same direction. This is very, very important. Then, of course, you've got to come up with a timeline, a plan. And that's the deployment schedule. How am I going to bring in these different interventions in my existing operation? How am I going to bring them in? Some of these might be at the R&D level, some might be at the shop floor level, some may be with suppliers, some may be with customers, and so forth. These are all going to be there. What is my time schedule? How am I going to be doing it? So this preparation also is part and parcel of how you're doing it. Now let's peel the onion a little bit. Let's try to find out how I get the awareness of my present status. How do I find out? How am I doing? So the questions that we'll be raising would be the following. Collate the information, write a factual report. You've got to produce this report in an objective manner, reporting the present status. Whether it's CPK number, whether it's the level of knowledge that people have in being able to control quality, and be able to take preventive actions and so on, that also will have to be done. We'll have to probably get external experts and let them do an audit. Let them try to validate some of the assumptions. Let them tell you exactly what things are right and what things really require some improvement there. I have to use that feedback that has come from these experts. I have to use that in a strategic planning process. This plan is going to guide your progress into Six Sigma with the Six Sigma project, basically for the next few months, which could be 6 months or 1 year. It could be as short as 3 months, but that plan will have to be laid out there. And you're utilizing this expert advice, the expert views on this. Organizational assessment, this is something you also have to do, and basically this is like knowing how you're doing. Attempt to answer the questions. I'm going to give you the questions on a scale of 1 to 5, and these are going to be a set of questions, and I'm going to be putting them on the screen one after the other, and you realize answering them can give you a lot of insight. Let's take a look. What I'd like you to do is put this in front of you and then try to rate your own organization on the basis of, try to respond to the question and respond it with a rating when 1 is lowest and 5 is the highest. That is like, if you're doing it all, if you're in a perfect state of affairs, then of course you'll rate yourself 5. If you're not doing so, if you're doing pretty badly, you'd probably rate yourself 1. And let's take a look at some of these questions. These are going to be indicating to you basically your preparedness, about moving into Six Sigma. It all begins with leadership. As I mentioned to you, this was done in one of the earlier sessions, that it's very, very important for the top person to act like a true leader. He should be, in fact, his visibility is very important, and this visibility in regard to satisfying customers is very important. If the top man talks quality, if he talks customer satisfaction, everyone is going to be oriented toward it. So this is the question that you'd like to ask. You could probably get someone to tell you how things are going. You can probably get a sense of it when you're speaking with your CEO or someone like that. Try to get a sense of how committed he is toward this. Do top management actively participate in creating and reinforcing customer focus throughout the organization? Do they do this? If they're doing this routinely, they'll be rated obviously at 5. If they provide active support, again they'll be rated 5. And do they recognize employee and team contribution? If they're doing this, these are part and parcel of leadership. If these things are going on, you're doing pretty well. If it is not happening, then of course you're not doing so well. Then strategic planning. Strategic planning, if you remember, it really has to fan out of the vision that the company has, and strategic planning positions the company in a better competitive position. That's what strategic planning does. It orients the company to be more competitive. If you've got right strategies, your goal is going to be, your actions are going to be such that you'll be able to outcompete other people who are also in the game with you, in the same game with you. Does the company have a common vision? This is that strategy. This common vision has to be shared by all employees in its true sense. Is that there? Is there an alignment toward that vision? As far as work processes are concerned, are they aligned toward that? And in fact, are they all synchronized in that direction there? Are there targets that have been quantified, and are they measurable? These are some of the things where you'd like to probably get some assessment. Is the commitment of resources for new facilities, process improvement, and training done considering long-term objectives? Because those are strategic objectives. When you put in resources or put in training programs and so on and so forth, do you keep this long-term perspective in mind? That would say that your strategic orientation is good. What about comparisons with competitors? Do you do that actively? If you're doing that actively, if you're doing this very actively, then of course you've got that strategic orientation and you'd be rating yourself pretty high. If not, you'd be rating low on all of these things. Information management. This is like very, very important again, because people, top management particularly, they must get good information to be able to do it. And take a look at the information flow. Is it easy for information to flow upward? Is it easy? Generally speaking, what happens, whatever the top people say, those come out in notices and so on and so forth. They come out in various notifications, they come out as in policies and so on and so forth. So communication upstairs to downstairs is generally there in all companies. There is not much of a problem there. But in fact, knowing whatever is happening at the grassroots, having that bubble up upstairs, is that easy to take place in a company? Do employees feel free to share information? Is this something that can happen very easily? If something is right or something is wrong, is that shared fairly easily, or do people have a problem there? What about access to information? Is that something that can happen without much difficulty? If it happens without any difficulty at all, you'd be ranking yourself pretty high. You'd be doing that. What about periodical updates? If there are periodical updates on the information management system, as you know, with technology, a lot of things have changed. We had basically paper logbooks and so on and so forth. Now, and that changed gradually and so on and so forth. Now you've got electronic databases, you've got knowledge banks and so on and so forth. How easy is it for us to get these updates? And the information system itself, is that getting updated once in a while? What about the quality of the information itself? Is that reliable and accurate for people to make decisions in time? This is like something that's very important. What about human resource focus? This is also something you'd like to be able to get a handle on. And that, of course, begins with quality leadership. This is something very, very important. And as far as setting an example is concerned, it must begin right at the top, because most people see that as an example. They'd like to follow through from that itself. This is something very, very important. The leaders must be true examples. Unless that happens, companies will not, many people will not find role models, and they'll do whatever makes good sense to them, and that's about it. What about education and training? And is that really oriented toward a couple of things? One is the needs of the employees, needs of the workers, needs of managers, middle managers, and everybody else. That's something very, very important. And also, is it in sync with the requirements? It's very important for training to be relevant. First of all, understanding what are the requirements, what all kind of competences I want. So some sort of competency mapping would also be useful here. And then you appropriately, plan out the educational calendar and the training calendar for different people. This is something that's part and parcel of it. As you probably have sensed, you must have sensed this, that Six Sigma requires the knowledge, the deep knowledge of certainly some of the statistical methods and a lot of other things also. And that training is pretty intensive, and you've got to have some good training done in order for people to reach that level and be able to execute those decisions and actions and so on and so forth. So that's also very, very important. What about employee feedback? Your HR focus, does that allow for quick and easy feedback from employees? If it is there, and if it is evaluated by the company, not just the feedback is received, but it's also evaluated very well, that's very, very important. That's very, very important for, you can actually see that if that thing is there, Six Sigma is probably going to be succeeding in terms of it being effective and it being easy to implement. Does the company have an effective system that is for setting both quantitative targets and also qualitative targets? These are human resource focused. These are the kind of things where human resource people, they can come out and say that yes, we do that very well, and we do it quite easily. Most people are aware of these things. That is like something that human resource people can sense very easily, and they should be able to kind of relate that. There's a few other things also that also come under human resource. For example, expected performance standards, are these known to people? If that is not known to people, then of course it's going to be pretty tough for people to kind of know where they are. Key quality improvement targets, are these known to people? These are key quality improvement targets, and these have to be integrated into the person's job. If there is a certain level of performance that is going on right now, what about the improvement targets? Are they aware of this? If they are aware of it, they'll start thinking about it. And this is something that's got to be, again, ensured by HR people. HR people have the time for it, and because they have a lot of contact with employees and so on, they can very easily check whether this is there or not. Are the improvement targets clear to people? What about the appraisal system, and does it actually take care of career progression of employees also? Because people, when they do a good job, they want to be appreciated, they want to be given a decent feedback, they want to be able to kind of appreciated for whatever contributions they make. In general, of course, having a positive orientation will go a long way. This creates good relationship between employees and the company. And this is something that probably cannot be skipped if you are really aspiring to have full participation. Along with, of course, there will be employee well-beings and the issue of reward and a general sense of the motivation level in the company, among the employees. Is it high? Is it oriented toward good performance? And is good performance suitably rewarded? And these are the kind of things that are going to be absolutely essential if you're going to be succeeding with Six Sigma someday. There are a few other things also. Human resource satisfaction. This is like a company has not only hardware, raw materials, and so on. It also got this vast body of a number of people who are there, and they are their resources. They are a very important part of the total resource that is there. Does the company make effort? Is it able to realize the full potential for all the people who are there in the company? Is it able to realize that full potential? Many times there are so many skills and know-how that employees have, but the company is not able to utilize them fully. This is something very, very important. Unless that happens, the man will not feel like really that he's accomplished something. He's got certain skills, he's got certain know-how and so on, but nobody is interested in knowing about them. Then probably even the level of motivation will probably go down. The existing scheme of incentives and rewards, is that adequate for maximum employee contribution? This is also something that you'd like to be able to see this. And is the company's image such that people feel that in this company, I really have good people to work with, and they are able to attract good talent, the best talent possible. What about customers and what about the marketplace? We got to look at a few things there that are kind of important. These are so important that without having this focus in place, focus toward the customer and the market, I really will have no target to shoot at. This is something very important. It has become even more important because the times these days are such that there are many, of course there are many customers, but there are many competitors also, many suppliers who'd like to be in the same business, who'd like to offer something that is slightly better than what you are doing. And it's very, very important for people to realize, for companies to realize that the future needs are going to be dictated by what competitive picture is there. And because expectations are changing. And generally speaking, competitors, they are coming up with new services, new products, and so on and so forth. It's very, very important that when I do my planning, when I look at customers, when I look at market, I think of tomorrow. I think of the needs of tomorrow. I think of the opportunities for tomorrow, and so on and so forth. I must find out a couple of things. I must find out the trends. Which way are the innovators going? Which way are some of the leaders in the pack going? And customers are going to be, many of them, they're going to be trying those new ideas and new products and new services and so on and so forth. And I should be ready to offer them. The moment the style catches on, I must be there with my products and with good quality performance also to be able to take care of them. It's very important for us to realize that customer expectations keep changing, and whatever I did before, whatever I did last year or 5 years back, probably the same thing is not being expected anymore by customers. And I've got to make sure that with this changing customer expectations, I also ride that tide. I've got to make sure I ride with it. Unless I ride with it, I'll have big trouble there. This is something I've got to keep in mind. So changing customer expectations are again something that I've got to know. Performance standards also got to be found out, because performance standards are basically for us to find out how we are doing. And this could be in a variety of different ways. It could be, for example, an example is how are other people doing versus how we are doing. What is the and you can do a lot of these things by doing either customer surveys, focus group surveys, and so on, and getting a lot of feedback from them. You can find out how your performance is. There's going to be that external performance, which is going to be close to the marketplace. There's also going to be internal performance by looking at your For example, your internal failure costs. And you've also got to look out for those who are leaving your business, they are going somewhere else. All this data is very, very important. When I have a problem or I have an issue, do I trace problems using quality measures? Do I do that? This is something that should be culture. I should really use quality measures. And what are quality measures? These are customer satisfaction measures. And for the company inside, it could be the amount of rework and the amount of basically cost of internal losses that go on. This is something, these are going to be quality measures. So quality measures are going to be found in a couple of ways. One, of course, is going to be the level of satisfaction that the customer achieves and the level of dissatisfaction that the customer attains. That also is kind of important. I've got to do the same thing for internal customers also. What about expanding market share? Is that due to my just better service, or is it better quality, or a combination of thereof? These are the kind of things that I've got to discover. So I've got to make sure I take care of these things when I'm moving slowly, gradually toward what we call Six Sigma. Take a look at some of the other factors that also have to relate to customer focus and market focus. Do I regularly evaluate the kind of commitment I have for service performance to match customer expectations? There are customer expectations, and today, in today's age, people are looking not only at finished products, but they are also looking at services. They are also looking at services. So in fact, they're looking at the total experience, the product plus service. And in fact, what we have to do is we've got to basically look at the commitment that the company has to try to improve, try to excel in that direction. This is something we've got to evaluate on a periodic basis. And we've got to promptly resolve all formal and informal customer complaints. This is something, if you ignore them, the moment you start ignoring them, the customer is going to ignore you. This is something that I cannot really escape. I've got to be able to do this. And of course, something that we did in QFD and also we did in Kano analysis, which is like determine the customer's current requirements and the expected requirements that he might like to have down the road, for example, if he does not have it today. This also is something that would like to be able to do that. Are we using, is the company using customer listening technique? Because the voice of the customer has to be captured. And one fairly straightforward way for doing that is to do QFD for all your key products and key services. Try to do a QFD, try to do some benchmarking there. Try to look at who is the best in town that provides the same product or the same service. This way, you'd be a lot closer to satisfying the customer than you'd be otherwise. What about future strategies? How do they bring in? Does the company analyze and use information on customer loss and customer gain, for example, and relate it to product performance to develop future strategies? If things are not going so well, or if things are going well, how do I dream up new strategies down the road? In fact, that's the manner in which I'm going to be running the company down the road, for example. How effectively do I determine customer satisfaction and make efforts to improve it? This is what requires a lot of good survey data. You've got to be able to get a lot closer to the customer. You've got to have really good ear to hear what he's saying. And listening to the customer's voice is by far probably the best example. And let me remind you again, there are two reasons why you should be listening very close to your customers, very closely to your customers. The first is, of course, what are her requirements? This is number one reason why you should be listening to your customers. Number two is, does she have any complaint? So what are her requirements and does she have any complaint? These are the two key reasons why you must be listening to your customers. If you do not do this, you are ignoring your customers, and then the customer is going to go somewhere else. And probably, most likely, you will not be able to take the action that will keep you competitive. So in fact, it's very, very important for us to have this in place. You also have to have a good knowledge of who your key competitors are and what they are offering the customer. You got to do the system for measuring or determining customer satisfaction on a regular basis. You got to find, or probably you got to improve the system. So there may be some system there. It may not be providing all the signals that you want to sense. These are the various instruments you're using to get a sense of what is going on in the minds of the customer in the marketplace. Take a look at the system once in a while. Take a step back and find out how effective are these systems, the systems that I have in place already. What about dissatisfaction indicators? These are also very, very important because they lead to redesign of your either your product or your service, retuning of the offerings that you make, that can come a lot. That can come really, really handy once you got this dissatisfaction data with you. What about the level of satisfaction? How does it compare to whatever your key competitors are doing? How are you stacking up against them? That's like one major area that you got to keep an eye on, because in most places you're not the monopoly. You probably have a lot of competition around you. Supplier focus. This is also a large area. Evaluate supplier performance. You got to make sure that your supplier is also top notch. First of all, find out what your CPK is, for example. Do you communicate effectively with your suppliers as far as quality requirements are concerned, as far as delivery requirements are concerned? Do you have written contracts? Do you audit them once in a while? Do you visit them once in a while? Quality requirements are so important. And also, once in a while, you might even organize training programs. There are good companies that do extensive training for their suppliers, because this is done to try to make sure what they deliver meets your requirements. And for this, they may not be prepared, they may not have the know-how, they may not have the technology. And in some cases, you may have to invest in some technology that he's using. You may have to upgrade his machinery. You may have to upgrade his training to be able to make sure that whatever he supplies, you can use it almost on a JIT manner. This is very important. There are a few other things also. Probably, and this is of course where there's a difference between the Western approach and the Eastern approach. In the Eastern approach, you have a cooperative arrangement with the supplier. And the Western approach, you try to set up competition among the suppliers. So hopefully that way they'll be working better, and so on and so forth. They'll become better suppliers. But the Eastern way of thinking, which is what the Japanese use, for example, or the Koreans use, is to get into a partnership with their suppliers. And this way, you feel that our success is achieved together. If my business goes down because of poor quality coming in, my supplier's business is also going to go down. If I succeed, my supplier must have some share of that success also, so that they also feel like they've got something out of the increased share of marketplace or increased profit that I had as his customer. This is something that's rather important. What about supplier satisfaction? Do I keep an eye on that? Do I have any kind of measurement? Are they paid on time? These are some of the critical things. You may not think much of this, but it's very, very important when it comes to maintaining a healthy relationship with your supplier. What about development of capabilities? This is like something that many companies are now trying to do. They work with their suppliers. They try to make sure the suppliers have the capability to be able to take care of the requirements, which are like today's requirements. Now let's get inside the process. This is like inside my house, my factory. Does product design, this is my design shop, do they consider the customer's implied and future needs? Now certain things are heard from the customer, some things are implied by the customer. Our product design people, do they really keep their ears open for this kind of thing? This is rather important. If this is not done, someday the customer is going to discover he's not going to be as happy using my product as opposed to somebody else's product. When I say product, of course I also include services in that. Does the company validate the design? Some design I've come up with, and I try to validate that design considering all the different factors. For example, performance of the product that I make, the process and supplier capabilities. Do I validate the designs? This is something that has to be done. Am I designing something that actually can handle various types of issues and so on and so forth? This is something. Will it perform the way it has been designed? Will it deliver the function that it has been designed to deliver, for example? This is going to be important. What about improvement of design? How do I go about doing this? And this is obviously a cyclic process. As market requirements change, as customer preferences change, and so on and so forth, do I come back, and how exactly, what is my process for improving my design? What is that cycle? What about the causes of variation? There is no process in the world that does not have some variation in it. But I've got to make sure I understand that variation. I understand what is natural variation, what is assignable variation, what is kind of random variation that customers are probably willing to live with. That will determine basically my CPK. And what is that extra variation that is very disturbing? That's like it happens once in a while, but it's assignable. And I must make an effort to try to keep the assignable variations out. This is something I should be able to do. As you know, the aim of Six Sigma is to tighten your variation. is to make sure a process that has got this kind of width is just barely matching customer requirements. I've got to make my process tighter so that the customer requirements are here, but my process variation is only this little small thing, which is really a fraction. So almost there is no chance for my requirements, my production to go away outside on this side, outside the spec limits or customer expectations, or on this side, because my process is pretty tight. So I've got to keep an eye on my process variation also. This is also something very important. And for that, of course, we go through this total process of trying to understand variability, and you go through the DMAIC process. One of the key objectives in the DMAIC process is to reduce variability, just as one of the goals is to try to reduce losses. What about better operational performance? Does the company analyze processes to try to achieve better quality? Does it do it routinely? Does it look at better operational performance? This is something that the company got to be able to do. And what about business processes? There are these processes that are going on in the factory, but a lot of transactions are taking place through business processes. And these are transaction processing, order processing, ordering stuff from suppliers, dealing with employees and so on. But there are a lot of business processes in action. What about the quality of those processes? What sort of bugs are there? What sort of errors are there? Are they efficient? Do they meet these goals that we have? For example, making sure the requirements are met, make sure the delivery takes place on time, and make sure it does not cost too much. Make sure it adds value. In other words, I've done some value engineering, or I've done some re-engineering of these processes, as far as business processes are concerned. My goal should be to try to analyze and regularly simplify processes which are there. This is very, very important. Unless I do this routinely, a lot of my processes are going to be basically loads. What about alternative technology? How often do I look at this? Now, any of these questions, mind you, they have to be rated on a scale of 1 to 5. So if you find your company is not doing this, you're probably going to rate this then at 1 or 2 level. And if the company is doing these things in a manner that is nearly the best in town, then of course you'll rate it probably near 4 or 5. What about use of information? What about benchmarking? Does the company use benchmarking, for example? Does it use judicial planning? These are some of the things that the company should be able to do. If processes reflect this, then of course the company is doing very well. What about impact on society? Because I'm not running my company in isolation. I've got to make sure that I take care of the needs and expectations of society at large also. That is also like an orientation that the company must have in order to move towards something as fancy as Six Sigma. If I rate low on this, there are going to be a lot of problems down the road if I try to force the company to move towards Six Sigma, if some of these things are not there, for example. What about the possible impact of products? This gets into a lot into what we call green manufacturing and so on. Because we've got to make sure that the impact of these products or services on society or the community at large, that's not really harmful in any way at all. That's something I've got to be able to take care of. What about ethical conduct? Can I stand up as an example? If I can, then of course I'll be rating the company at 5, close to 4 or 5. What about preservation of global resources? Is the company active in this area, or does it really not bother about tomorrow? If it does not bother about tomorrow, of course it's going to get a low rating. What about business result? At the bottom line, for example, do we really have a quality leadership? What about industry growth? As far as my progress is concerned, how does it compare with, for example, what we call industry growth? The overall industry has been growing at 10% level, let's say year to year. What about my company? How is it doing? Is it better than 10%? Is it double of 10%? Or is it below 10%? I've got to have some idea there. What about shareholder expectation? This also is something where there's a direct link between these numbers, the shareholders' expectations, and basically the business results of the company. That's also something very, very important. Once you've done this, say your ratings turn out to be between 281 and 350, there's the sum total of all the questions that you answered. Suppose rating turns out to be in this range here, 281 to 350, that's pretty good news. You are doing very well, but there is obviously no room for complacency. You've got to make sure that you keep the charge on, you keep the mission shining brightly so that everybody is oriented toward that, everybody is moving toward that. You're doing a good job, but you got to sustain it, you got to maintain it, and if possible, try to go up a little bit, because you might not be at 350. 350 is the max score. You may not be there. So try to find out, why the gap, and that is there. Suppose you're doing 211 to 280. Most likely, many other companies are doing just this. So you're just part of the big, large pack there. In fact, it turns out that if you're in a condition like this, if you're in this 211 to 280 range, with a little bit of effort, you can move up. With just a little bit of effort, because this is what everybody is doing, and this is probably what you're doing, without any kind of special effort at all. This is something you've got to keep in mind. You've got to make sure that you understand that if I do not make any effort at all, and then I'm here, then perhaps with just slight bit of effort, I may be able to move up into this slot of 281 to 350. That's what the real gravy is. That's what the real returns are going to be. You got to remember, every Six Sigma project has to be justified on cost basis, on loss prevention basis, on loss reduction basis, on, for example, so cost reduction or increased market share and so on. It's got to show a positive return. Unless you are able to show a positive ROI from any kind of Six Sigma effort you put into the company, it's not going to be worth it. Then you're doing something that is no different from the general HR improvement and that kind of thing. It's just another campaign. That's really not going to be very motivating. And most likely, if you stay at this level with your Six Sigma projects, the company is not going to support future improvements, even if they are very sensible, because they'll have a sour taste in their mouth from this. Now suppose you are below 140. That is like, if you really ended up scoring below what we call, if you are at 141, of course, your direction is pretty clear. That means you got to improve. That is pretty clear. So you need to intensify your effort to go up. But suppose you are below 140, that's a very serious situation. That means you may not be able to survive for long. This is something that we got to really watch out for. It's extremely important for us to realize that as far as times go, we've got to make sure that we are never caught in this sort of thing. And of course, you'll be caught in this if you're sleeping throughout. You've been sleeping throughout, you'll not be in the first two. First two is like excellent or good. You won't be there. You'll be probably an average, or you'll be even below that. And this is pretty dangerous sign. And of course, this might mean you need a revamp, not just your technology. For example, you also need a lot of training. You need a lot of contact with knowledgeable people. And you've got to make sure you set up your course right. So you start with your mission. You've got some vision there. You got your mission there. From that, you work out a strategy. And then you try to actualize those strategies. DMAT would give you a great framework to try to move in that direction. This is like something that we cannot really escape. Assessment report, this is also something that we got to be able to produce. This is basically a factual account of how the company is operating today. This is something very, very important. This assessment report basically is a condition of the health of the system. And it's so important, I just can't tell you how important it is. This is, of course, something that is done pretty routinely, except the reports are stacked up. Once in a while, there is some action there. But what happens most of the time, people are fighting fire. Very few people really, those who are at mid-level and below that, they're able to do much besides just fighting fire. And that's really not the way we should be doing this. So if you got assessment reports, see if you could track it. If you could look for a trend, if you could identify a trend. If any trend does not look like something you'd like to see for your company, try to see what interventions could be thought of. Make a list of existing strengths and weaknesses, something that is done in SWOT analysis. That's something very, very important. You've got to make sure you prepare a list of present and future opportunities. It could be new markets, it could be training opportunities, it could be upgradation opportunities, it could be R&D opportunities, it could be new product opportunities. It could be any of those things. Make a list of those things. And of course, then you should try to see if you could make a list of what we call Six Sigma projects. What are Six Sigma projects? These have a specific mission. They start with something where you either have a large loss, and that's going to cost you some money, or you have poor performance, or your performance that is not competitive, and you've got to make sure either you cut your losses, or you reduce your cost, or you produce some new markets, new opportunities, or you improve your quality. The moment you start improving quality, it's going to be noticed. And it's going to be noticed by customers, and they want to make sure that You actually offer something that is better than what they are getting somewhere else. If you are not experienced in this today, you have to work out a DMAC plan. You got to again start with definition, define the gap. It's very important that you define the gap. Define basically the problem. Then you measure the present level of performance. You measure that. And then when the gap is there, when clearly this is different from where it should be, there's a difference between the target and where you are. You look at this difference and you try to sort of see why this. You'll do this cause and effect analysis, and this you'll do at the analysis phase. Try to identify basically at a speculative level all the different factors that could be contributing to this gap. This is very, very important. Once you identify the gap, that's half the job is done. Because now you can speculate about causes and you can move gradually toward improvement. Improvement is going to be very, very systematic. Improvement is going to be using a lot of statistical training, a lot of, perhaps even get some field data, customer data, and so on and so forth. And you'd be trying many different alternatives to try to come up with a better solution. Either a better product, better design, better service, improved service, and this could be done on any front. It could be done in terms of, for example, cost, meeting requirements, delivery times. These are some of the things that are, or perhaps employee morale, any of those things. Any place where you can make a positive impact, make that the target. And that's going to have an overall synergistic effect on the overall performance of the company. These are the areas where you could conceive a Six Sigma project. So it would be either to cut cost or to reduce losses. Reduce cost is a very, very, very important contributor to the bottom line. And improvement in quality is a very big contributor to the top line, which is like your total sales. And expanding market share. Both of these can actually give you an edge and do wonders for you. Critical issues. What are some of the critical issues? The major focus versus problem focus. Method focus versus problem focus. What we really should be doing is, we should really see what we could do, and these are superior choices. And let's take a look at some of these things. The tradition has been, you look at methods. But really what you should do is, when you look at an opportunity, you look at, focus on the problem. Don't worry too much about the method. Focus on the problem. What about productivity? Should you really worry about productivity, or should you put your concern on quality? What the wise people say is focus on quality. Productivity will follow on its own. What about soft progress versus hard progress? This also is something that one has to look at. And in this case, of course, hard progress takes place when you really produce impact either on the top line, which is your sales money, or the bottom line when you got your cost there. And focus on manufacturing systems versus all systems. Should you focus on the manufacturing system only? Remember now, quality is the job, quality is the responsibility of everybody. See, even if you improve, even if you come up with a top-notch manufacturing system, is your design system equally good? Is your delivery system equally good? Is your customer service equally good? You may have done a top job in producing the best possible product as far as manufacturing goes. What about these other parts? What about talking to the customers to try to understand their requirements, for example? Are you also doing as good a job there? If these are not going to be there, and that really means improving systems all around, not just focusing on manufacturing. This is something very, very important. Let's take a look at methods versus problem focus. Your goal really should be, do not worry too much about these specific tools like SPC, JIT, QFD, DOE, any of these things by themselves. Don't really fall in love with any of these tools by themselves and just justify your work just because you love DOE. That's not important. What is really important is for you to locate the problem. If you locate the problem, if you find the answer can be found through DOE, go ahead and use DOE. But here, the focus really should be on the problem and not on the particular method that you might be using. What about this focus on productivity versus quality? As you know very well, focus on quality will eventually lead to an improvement in productivity, because the fraction of parts produced which are not going to be so good, they're also going to be there. And that's something that's very, very important for us to realize. We got to make sure there is soft progress versus hard progress, and there, of course, we want to make sure that intermediate results are also looked after. And of course, I've got to make sure, I've got to keep an eye on the end result also, but the intermediate result becomes part of the quality chain. So you've got to make sure that the total system works right and all the pieces are worked right. And please do not focus only on the manufacturing system. When you're trying to get into Six Sigma, many people feel that Six Sigma basically looks at manufacturing only, and that's really a misconception, because Six Sigma can go after any process at any stage of the conduct of your business. Something that is there. What are some of the prerequisites of successful implementation? Let's take a look at this. The top one, of course, is management commitment. If this is not there, you'll have big trouble there. A measurement system that produces that gap, that identifies and produces that gap. A benchmarking system that basically looks at what is best in town, what is best in industry, and compares that with your performance, so you identify the gap. Then you set up some stretch goals. These should be way beyond where you're performing today. As you probably know, as you probably remember from the cases, Motorola tried to improve their quality performance 100 folds in a couple of years. They wanted to do this 100 folds. So if they had their defect level at, let's say, 5,000, they wanted to bring it down to 50 in a couple of years. They wanted to make a 100% improvement in this thing. This is a stretch goal. This is not something that will be achieved overnight with some tinkering of processes and so on. So this is also something you've got to keep your eyes on. You've got to have a few of these great guys who are like the black belts, the champions in your organization. They are the ones who have the know-how, and they also have the motivation, they want to perform and so on and so forth. And to be able to support them, to make sure you've got a good team there, you've got to make sure you've got good training all around. These are going to be some of the prerequisites for successful implementation of Six Sigma. Creating Six Sigma focus. This, of course, I've already given you some of these tips. Focus on cost savings, focus on deliverables, whatever the customers are interested in, focus on processes to try to make sure their capabilities are good, and focus on problems. Whenever there are problems, there are deviations from what is expected, you got to make sure you take care of them. Focus on project cost savings. Basically, there are fixed or variable costs. Both reductions can be achieved and both reductions can be targeted. The greatest cause for customer dissatisfaction is basically we're not really worried about deliverables. This is like something very, very important. Root causes of defects, because I've got to go after processes and customer satisfaction concerns. These would be done when I focus on processes. And root causes are analyzed. One of the greatest tools is the cause and effect diagram. That's something I've got to be able to do. The Six Sigma design process, if you look at the design process, how is the process designed, how the product is put together, there are certain steps, and I'm showing here in a flow chart. Take your time and basically take a look at it. And just like we talked about process improvement, using Six Sigma, you can also improve designs using Six Sigma. I've got a few tips here. Focus on problems. As far as design is concerned, we've got to be able to do that. And as far as achieving Six Sigma is concerned, I can do certain things when I'm involved in manufacturing, and there are certain things I can do when I'm doing an administrative job. There also I can have, and this list is there for you to take a look at and see what you can locate in your own organization, and to try to do a good job there. So in fact, look not only at manufactured products or manufacturing processes, also look at the administrative office and so on. You'll find many opportunities where you can make an impact. So in fact, there'll be actions required on any of these fronts. Top-down commitment and involvement. This has to come from top management. This has to be there. A measurement system should be there. Toward goal setting, this is like something reaching out, having stretch goals and so on. And to provide the required education to be able to sort of ask why and be able to answer how to and those things. These will come through training, and many of these are facilitated when you've got black belt people with you. And of course, spread success stories. Whatever success stories are there, you got to make sure those are publicized, so other people keep believing in it. So what is the Six Sigma experience telling us? It is telling us that there is no secret to quality. It's all very systematic. There are no silver bullets. There are no magic bullets that tell you if you take this bullet, you'll be able to win. That's not there. Quality doesn't take time. It actually ends up saving time in the end. It's not only free, it actually pays back some dividend. This is the story of quality. An average company spends about 25% of its time on wasted revenue. The revenue is wasted. 25% of it is wasted on non-value activities. This is there. Quality processes apply to administrative side as well as the business side. This is something that we got to remember. Not only manufacturing, other people can also benefit from this. And service companies are no different from manufacturing. This also is something that we got to make sure. Why was Motorola successful? Here's a little thing. High-level management involvement was there. Aggressive involvement was there towards setting goals. Measurements was done. Corporate-wide uniform goals were done. And definitely they did very extensive training, including that of management. And accountability also was there for quality improvement. These are some of the things that led to Motorola being really one of the leaders. And if you see how they actualize that, that's in the last slide. And they did this with a deep sense of urgency, spread the dedication to every facet of the corporation, and achieve a culture of continual improvement to assure total customer satisfaction. There is only one ultimate goal, and that is zero defects in everything we do, signed by the Executive Committee of Motorola. Just see how strong that commitment is. And they tried to improve their quality performance 10 times by 1989 and 100-fold by 1991, starting at 1987. We'll continue with our wrap-up story, which will be in the next lecture. Thank you very much.